There are peppers all over the market. My favorite time of the year, all different varieties, all different kinds of chilies. Why not make some hot sauce? Now look, we're not talking about just any hot sauce here. Let's make a fermented hot sauce. Good fermentation, right? We've talked about fermentation. I've posted about fermentation before, but you know what? Let's revisit it again. We haven't made fermented hot sauce. This is the perfect time. We have all of these beautiful peppers here. And you know what these look like, habaneros? But they're not. So let me tell you, these are actually called habanadas. This is a new seed. Well, let's say this is a relatively new seed. They developed maybe about 5 years ago. Some very smart farmers and scientists were able to crossbreed the good characteristics of the habanero pepper and kind of get rid of those undesirable, crazy, spicy characteristics. So instead what we're left with is this beautiful looking pepper with all of those melon, floral, kind of citrusy notes that you would find in a habanero without any of the heat. So I thought it'd be really fun to turn these into a hot sauce. I want to ferment them, get that good fermentation going, bring out some of those kind of like lactic acid flavors. This will only take a couple of days, but you know what? You can use any kind of peppers you get your hands on. If you can't find habanadas, but if you ever find habanadas, I highly recommend you check these guys out. All right. Peppers are rinsed, time to get to work. We need to break down the peppers into more manageable pieces for fermentation. All right, check it out. First thing we gotta do here is take the stems off of the top of these. The stems are not edible, so we're just gonna cut those up and discard them. Peppers here are done. We wanna break these down even further to make it easier for them to ferment more evenly and consistently. All right, now you have some decisions to make. I wanna break these peppers down into a paste, so I have a fermented pepper paste that I can either eat on its own or blend into a hot sauce. If you wanna go straight to the hot sauce route, you could just rough chop these by hand, totally bypass the food processor. I just find this is a little more consistent to get that pepper paste and less time chopping these up by hand. So because these aren't spicy, we could go seeds, ribs, everything in here except the stems. Lid on and give this a quick pulse. The smell of this is crazy without any of the heat. So we're looking for homogeneous, even-sized, chopped pieces, something looking exactly like this. This is gonna make some really good hot sauce. Here we go, stick with me here. We're gonna take this and we wanna weigh it out. Fermentation is very much dependent on percentages and weight, making sure that we control the good bacteria growth and prevent the bad bacteria growth so we have the right kind of fermentation going on here. In order to do that, we're going to need a scale. Any sort of kitchen scale will do, but you do need a scale. It's very hard to do this without knowing the weight of your peppers here, what you're starting with. All right, peppers in the bowl. Bowl is teared out. This weighs nothing now on the scale. I know the total grams of the weight of these peppers. Now you have a couple choices here. You could do this with a brine method in which you make a percentage of salt in a water brine. Include that weight in the weight of the vegetable that you're fermenting. But since I want this to be a pepper paste or a hot sauce, I don't want all that brine liquid to either be taking away that flavor or diluting that pepper flavor. I want to preserve as much of this habanada flavor as possible. So what instead I'm going to do is just get the total weight of this. I'm going to add a little bit of water to kind of help this process start and make sure that the peppers pull off enough juice from the salt alone in order to prevent them from fermenting badly. So now I have the total weight of water and peppers. Here in a bowl, the amount of water is arbitrary. You could add as much or as little as you want. And then we need to weigh out the salt. Once again, my handy dandy flip calculator. My friends make fun of me because I have a flip calculator. I know we all have calculators on our phone, but I'm kind of old fashioned in that sense. I don't want to pull out my phone. I might get distracted. I want a calculator at my fingertips in the kitchen. So this lives right next to my scale. I know, call me crazy, but I love it. So now I have the total weight of my peppers and water times 2.1%. 2.1% I find is a great percentage for fermenting. You go anywhere from about 1.9 to 2.3 and be in the safe zone where you're going to kill any bad bacteria. I think 2.1 is a perfect balance. And that tells me then how much salt I need to add. All right, easy enough. We just want to disperse the salt here evenly all throughout our peppers. That little bit of water there in the bowl is going to help make sure that salt is evenly mixed around and all of the peppers. Next thing here, we have a glass mason jar. I like using glass. It works better in terms of keeping all of the flavors inside, not bleeding out if you're using plastic or anything like that. But of course, whatever you got, Tupperware works just as well. Make sure your jar is clean all the way through, clean around the rims, especially your hands are clean. We are trying to prevent any cross-contamination of the wrong kind of bacteria. But of course, we have the salt that's going to help kill any of the bad bacteria as well. So now we're going to put these peppers into this jar. And then I realize a spoon is probably gonna work better. Do your best not to spill the peppers everywhere. Last of the peppers into the jar. I always like to press all of these peppers down into the jar just so they're evenly and equally submerged in any juices that start to form. Of course, there's going to be juices. That's part of the process. We also have that little bit of water in there, and the salt is going to pull out a lot of the moisture that's in these peppers. So we want to make sure that they're just all packed down in the bottom and we don't have any up hanging out around the rim. All right, we have our jar. Nice clean lid. I'm going to put the lid on, not sealed. Very important. We don't want to seal the lid. There's going to be a lot of gas forming in here. We want a place for that gas to escape. Otherwise, you're going to have to burp this every day. But for the first couple of days, we're just going to leave the lid very loosely fitting on there. That's going to allow any of the buildup of gas to get out of the jar. Fermenting peppers. Let's talk about what we're actually doing here, right? I mean, we're talking about fermentation. Normally you hear fermentation, you think it might be a bad thing. Fermentation is actually a pretty good thing. It's a really cool thing. A lot of the foods you may be familiar with out there, like sauerkraut or soy sauce, pickles, are all a form of fermentation. So what we're doing here is actually lacto fermenting. You hear the word lacto, you may think it means milk, but this has nothing to do with milk. We're actually talking about lactobacillus, which is a good bacteria. It is a bacteria that can survive in a very salty environment, so it works very well for a salt fermentation here. Most other bad bacteria that you don't want to eat cannot survive in a salty environment, hence why salt is an excellent preservative. At the end of the day, we're talking preservatives, we're talking salt, we're talking fermentation is a form of preserving vegetables. So what we've got here is our 2.1% salt and our peppers. And we're fermenting. What's happening is all of the bad bacteria is dying. All of the salt is pulling out moisture, creating its own kind of pepper brine here in the jar. And we are promoting the growth of good bacteria, lactobacillus. During that process, it's converting, the lactobacillus is feeding on the sugars and the starches here in the vegetable. It is converting them to lactic acid. Lactic acid is great. It is incredibly flavorful. It's delicious. We want that flavor to be pulled out of the pepper. This process takes anywhere from 1 day to 2 weeks, 3 months. If you're talking something like kimchi, I'm told kimchi could take anywhere from 6 months to multiple years to make and get to the proper fermentation or funkiness that you're going for. In this case, I'm gonna check on it every day. As soon as it hits the point where it's just sour enough or just funky enough for me, I'm gonna seal the lid, I'm gonna stick it in the fridge, and that cold environment is going to slow down the fermentation and bring it almost to a complete halt, in which case I will have pepper paste, fermented, tasting delicious like habaneros. I could then at that point blend it, I could add some vinegar, I can season it up however I'd like, or I could just eat it by the spoonful. Good stuff.